little web demo of the iPECS NMS, which is the Network Management System. The iPECS NMS Network Management System. The iPECS NMS is basically an SNMP-based agent manager communication tool. The web browser itself is a web-based client that we're going to be accessing to then utilize and look at this particular information that we have from our systems and that we have from our ES switches themselves. We can then monitor up to 500 devices can be managed through the system. And as I was saying, we're going to be looking at the ES switches and we're going to be looking at the iPECS systems themselves. There's three main feature categories that we have. There are common categories, there's system categories, and then there's a switch features. These are integrated with the iPECS NMS so that we can then look at the particular services that we have. So if we're looking at common features, we're looking at device registration, we're looking at alarms and fault management, and we're looking at the network topology itself. And then we're also looking at logging in to the NMS, login, logout, and the credentials associated with it, and the server settings. If we're looking at the switches, we're looking at the switch performance, we're looking at the VLAN configurations, whether to see spanning tree is connected or not. On there, we're also looking at any traffic control on those particular switch ports themselves. On the system side, we're looking at the system configuration and inventory, so what devices are connected to that particular system and how many are they. We can look at the devices themselves and the channel status, so we're going to be looking at the CO lines and the stations and seeing what each individual channel is doing. We can then look at the system databases and we can do upgrades or firmware uploads. We can also do a scheduled upload, and we can do scheduled downloads as well. And then we can have a little look at call statistics and then traffic on the devices themselves. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that we can actually log in to our NMS server itself. So what do we want to be able to do? We want to be able to browse to the NMS server's IP address, and then by default you've got your admin is your user ID, and the password by default is iPECS NMS. It is advisable to change these if you're going to keep these on a public IP address and make them accessible. So what we need to do now is we need to go in and actually have a look at our NMS server ourselves. So I will browse to the NMS IP address. So in my case it's http 192.168.1.2, and it'll bring up the login screen where we can put in our user ID, in this case ours is admin, and then the password I can put in as well. Okay, and it's not iPECS NMS. So from here we can log into the system. So looking at the system itself, I can see that I have my Pragma UCP that is connected. If I click on that, I can see the credentials on the right-hand side. I can see that I have a couple of switches, and one of them I've made disconnected to show you that if one is disconnected, it shows disconnected. So I can see the other switches themselves, and I can look at their IP addresses. We can have groups set up which allow us to communicate locally on the systems themselves. So if we have multiple sites, it'll allow us to communicate and then show them in a nice, easy fashion to find. All right. So we can have group configurations, and if I drop down on that, we can see that we have Pragma and we have our switches connected. All right. We also have a web-based option as well. So this allows us to look at the system itself, and by clicking on that we can see that we have the device itself, its local IP address, and we can also see it has a password in there. With our security on ours, on the TLS, when I click on the website, it'll bring up the public IP address which it wants to go to. In this case, it won't log in automatically because we have to now bypass the security on the front of the system itself. So we'll wait for that. We'll continue past. And if I just take off the index on that, and then if I go in there, I can then put the user ID and the passwords directly into it. All right. And we can do the same with the switches themselves. Okay, we can log directly into them and their IP addresses. Next tab across is the alarms and the faults. So this will bring us up any new faults that are occurring. Okay, and the fault level can be major, it can be minor, or it could be critical. So on this particular system, nothing's flashing up red being critical, and this is just saying that we have some minor faults with the devices that are going up and down, or a station being locked or unlocked. All right. If we have any of these items that we have viewed and we no longer wish to see them on the display, we can tick their boxes across there, and then we can delete so that they are no longer showed in the display for us. So essentially, we want to make sure that we keep an eye on these. Otherwise, we're just going to fill up with hundreds of minor faults. We can change the configuration themselves. So what is major, what is minor, what is critical, and these levels can be set against the different alarm names or fault names. So something like a CPU overload, something that will cause the system to go down or reset, then you might want to enable those as critical. And if we drop down on the box there, we can see we have critical, major, and minor. So CPU overload, I've made that critical, and I do want it to email me, and I do want an audible alarm, and definitely I want it saved in the log for it to show up. We've got different options as we go down. We can see from devices up and down, we can see stations locked, we can see VSF memory capacity. If we go a little bit further down, we can see bits about decked base stations, decked gateways themselves. If we go further down, especially for the ones with the SIP, we've got SIP proxy server connectivity. So if the SIP goes down and is no longer connected, we can then mark that as critical. And same again, if you wished, you could have email and an audible alarm. If the system is reset, I would like to know about it, so therefore I've done an email, an audible alarm, and I've marked that up as critical. These can be adjusted to suit how you wish to have them. All right. So not only can we change the system side, but we can also change the switch side. So we can mark up if the switch changes power state. So in other words, if it's powered down or there's a fan failure, we can mark those up as critical, and same again. We can send out an email or an audible alarm. So depending upon what's happening on the switch, we can mark them up as major and minor and critical. All right. Network traffic itself will have the devices themselves. So can we do a ping? Can we do a trace route? So same again, if we type in an IP address, if we put an IP address into the system, and we can then start a particular ping track on that particular option, and out it will ping. And if it gets a reply, we can see the reply and the delay. Okay, and any variation in it. All right. Trace route is very similar. It'll go off and find a particular trace, and we'll do this one as well. So if we start that, it will send out a trace route and it will come back with a reply for us. There we go. So out it goes. So it doesn't take too long, and there we go. All right. We can start looking at some network traffic as well. So I fired this one up a second ago and started that one, so we can see the traffic itself going in and out of the unit itself. All right. So we can look at the network traffic, and we can do it either live or in 60 minutes or in 24 hours and so on. We have a log on the system. So each time a admin user, or there are two other there's an operations and a monitor option to log in as well. So we can see every time a user ID is logged in and when they log out. So as I was saying, we have got different users themselves. So we've got an admin, which is an administrator, we've got an operation and a monitor. So basically the monitor can only monitor what's happening, they cannot make any changes to the system itself. And operation, you can then assign how much operation they have. Okay. We do have a little NMS tab at the very end, which is the credentials on the system itself. So if we were looking at the SMTP configuration in terms of who is it going to email and how is it going to email out, we can put those communications and details in there. There is also a firewall IP address, so if it's sitting on a public site with port forwarding to it, how is it going to communicate? So the ports that we do use are ports 161 and 162, so TCP 161 and TCP UDP 161 and TCP and UDP 162. So let's actually have a look at the system side themselves. So the system side itself will bring up the system, so we need to click on the system to tell it which system to show. So in this case, it's going to bring up our UCP at Pragma, and we can see here that we have a UCP 600, nation code is 44, IP address 192.168.1.250, and it's giving us all the credentials associated with that, including the firmware of the device. It also then gives us additional information in terms of how many devices are connected, how many ports, how many COs, what's the IP address range, system codec. Then it gives us the details of the system itself. On the right hand side, it's showing us who the attendant is, which is the attendant station. But from that we can also see what CO groups are. So we can see what's in line group 1, what's in line group 2, what's in line group 3, and line group 4 and so on, which is in a dead group. We can also see which hunt group members have been created. So we can see 401 is an ACD group and 402 is a ring group, and then we can see the members of the particular groups themselves, and we've got 430 being the VSF. All right. We have a device inventory, and the inventory, let's select the system. So the device inventory is what is connected to the system. How many devices have we got and what are they? Okay, so we had a previous breakdown on the other page, which is basically over here, but then how many processors have we got, how many PRI gateways, how many analog lines, modules, how many VoIP gateways, how many UCS clients, and if we go how many IP decked phones, how many 9030s, how many UVMs, how many communicators, how many 9070s or 8050Es. So it tells us about all the devices that are connected and how many they are. We can look at the status of the system itself. So the status is basically saying which devices are connected. So we can break it down. We can have a look at all the devices that are connected, or we can break them down into an easy look, which will give us the CO lines. So what CO lines have we got connected? How many VoIP? How many PRI? Analog lines, call recording servers. We can then look at the stations themselves, see which ones are physically plugged in and active and which ones are disconnected. Okay. And we do end up with some other modules, bits and pieces like WTIMs and UCS servers and MCIM gateways and multimedia conferencing. All right. And the UVM, which is the voicemail itself. We can look at the channel status, so the CO channels, so the CO lines. What are they doing? So the different colors refer to the different types. So are they VoIP lines, are they PRI, BRI, or PSTN? And then we can see whether they're in use, whether they're idle, whether they're out of service, depending upon the icon itself. Okay. And if we did select a particular line itself, we'll be able to then see the particular line marked up as a DDI. It's in CO group 1. It's in use at the moment. Okay, we can also then break that down a little bit further and actually see that it's attached to the PRI and what its firmware level is. Okay. And we can also look at the IP address of that particular PRI module. Okay, we can also see that it's a local module and it's not a remote. Okay, and we can see that it's multicasting because it's local. We can also do the same for the individual stations themselves. So the station status, and same again, the colors will give us the type of handsets that we have. So do we have any IP phones? So the blue ones are the IP phones. Are they soft phones? Are they SLTs? Are they key sets? So we've got a key set up there in 2901. How many DECT have we got? How many DSSs are there? How many SIP extensions, etc. All right. So same again, just like we had, we can pick up the extension and we can see if it has this particular station name. It'll come up if it's what the extension number is and where it is in the system itself, and is it in use. And that's actually the one I'm using. Okay. We can then look at the device itself, and we can see that it's a LIP9030. We can see the firmware level on it. Okay. And we can also then tell what its IP address is and whether it's local or remote. Okay. And we can see the statuses of whether they're busy, idle, out of service, locked up, and so on. Okay. We have some call statistics themselves. So we can look at individual devices themselves. So we can have a little look at the call statistics. So I can quickly run this report over here. So it's going to say, for us in this case here, we're looking at completed calls on an hourly basis today. So we can see between 8 and 9 we only had a few calls. So we can see, here we go, completed. And as we go up throughout the day, we can see by 11 o'clock it's peaking. During lunchtime it dips back down today, and then as we get through the rest of the day between 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and suddenly there's a reduction by 5 o'clock. All right. And we can see that hourly, and we can change this. We can change the type, so to do it daily if we wish as well. And we can also judge on all sorts, COs, voicemail, and we can break it down. Okay. We can look at a particular traffic on a particular device itself. We can look at the SMDR. We can look at the statistics. If you have DECT, we can look at particular DECT statistics, if there's any DECT statistics to show. In this case, the W10 is not connected, so there's no DECT statistics to look at, but we could select the system and we could load the current data if there was data to look at. There are those alarms. So we've got our major, minor, major, and critical, and we can look at those there, and we can have an audible sound playing. So I've left these stats quite high so it gives us something to look at, otherwise there would be pretty much zeros for us. So I've left them across there for us to look at. The iPECS traffic itself, so if we're looking at devices, so what can we look at? We can look at an individual 9040, so we can look at the 9040 on this particular address, and we can then stop and start, and we can look at the flow of the traffic on that particular device. So is the packet arriving? Is the packet being traced and available for us to look at? And we can do that on the other extensions here as well. Okay. And same with the devices themselves. So we can look at the same data itself. So if you make sure you select your system so it knows what it's looking at, and then we can run a particular traffic analysis on that particular device as well. Under the maintenance tab, this is where we can then upgrade the system, so we can do a firmware upgrade. So you would browse for the particular file, and we'd go off and browse for it, and then we could then set a particular time that we wish for the file to be uploaded, okay, to be executed. System database, this gives us an option there to do an upload or to do a download from the system itself. If we click on the database, we can choose how we want to do it. Do we just want to do LCR? Do we want to do system speed dials, flexibles? In the most case, we want to do them all. So what can we do? We can click on the download. Right, make sure you choose the system. So select the system, and then we can do download. and shortly you'll see a little tab shoot across and you'll get your percentage of your download. So do we want to save it? And yes, I can say save. Brilliant. Okay. And then you can view your downloads, so it's completed. Good. All right. We'll go back to the page that we're on. Good. And we can go back and save that file where we wish to save it in our PC itself. All right. The other good thing that we can do is we can do a scheduled backup. So on the system, I've got it doing a scheduled backup at 23:30, so 11:30 at night, and it's going to be back in the system up automatically. So I don't need to go in and do a backup every single day. Why? Because I've scheduled the backup to be executed at 23:30 at night every night. All right. And we do get options to upload prompts, and we can then upload greetings as well. So we'll choose the particular file that we want, and we'll need to then upload that particular prompt. And same with system greetings. So if you wish to load up a different language, so language 1, language 2, language 3, and so on, we can then upload different greetings to the system itself. The switches. So this is going to be an Ericsson-LG ES switch. So it'll be the ES. So if I drop down on that little box, we can see that if I clicked on the first switch, we can see the credentials come up, and we can see what's going to be happening. So we will see all our switches themselves and the ports that are available. If I click on the third switch, we can see that we have different ports on there as well. So not only does it tell us what ports are available, and we can be able to see where they are and which location they're in, but we can also see the ports themselves. If we look at the interfaces, we can see the switch. We'll just bring the switch up. We have the systems themselves, that are 10-100 or 100 or 1000, so are they gigabit or are they 10-100? We can see whether any auto negotiation is set up. We can see whether the ports are up or down, full duplex, or any flow control that have been set. If there's any port mirroring that have been set, then that will come up as well. And same again with any special or any statistics that have been set against a particular port. So we can look at one of these ports. So if we take, say, port number 1, we can then have a look at the particular port itself. So we can then start that. And shortly you'll see the traffic flow on that particular port. All right. There we go. So we can see the traffic going up, going down, and what's happening within that particular system itself. If there are any VLANs connected, we'll be able to see any VLAN capability that has been set up. And we'll just wait for that to pop up on here. There we go. And by this case here, they're all in, there's no VLAN set up at all. Spanning tree will pop up to see if any spanning tree has been set up. So in this case, spanning tree is enabled, and we can see the system set up itself. Okay. Traffic control. So we can see any interfaces that have been set up on the devices themselves. So if we have any policies or any classes that have been set up, in this case there's no policies and there's no classes set up. But one thing that we can have a look at is the rate. So what is the bit rate like? Has it been enabled, disabled, and what the statuses are? And same with the storm control themselves. So if we have a look on that, we'll see, is anything enabled or not? Okay. So overall, we have a nice, simple application that will allow us to have a look at the systems themselves and to bring up our devices and to show us all our alarms. Thank you very much, and hopefully see you soon. Bye.